Look, I've talked about how the system in America is pretty much rigged in favor of the wealthy and rigged against regular people. Now, our country right now lives by the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. You only have to look to our corrupt campaign finance system as evidence of that. You give politicians money, and they do whatever the fuck you want them to. And that's it. Now, as a result of this, there is socialism for the rich in the form of massive subsidies and tax breaks and giveaways, and rugged individualism for the poor. And we see this in everyday society. Now, the UN, in its latest report, backs that up. Now, in their most recent report, they actually target the Trump administration, and they said that they took a situation that was already pretty bad, extreme inequality that was going on under President Bush and President Obama as well, and through their policies actually made it worse. Now, the report was published by Philip Alston. Now, he is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. He is also Australian, so I think he would understand from an outside perspective how fucked up our system actually is. Now, what he did is he basically came to America and he toured some of the most poverty-stricken areas in America. Now, he actually went to San Francisco, I believe, or someplace in California, or different places throughout California, which, of course, there is a bit of a homelessness crisis going on because of housing prices are so expensive. And he also went to places like Alabama. Now, in his report, he found that the American dream is rapidly becoming the American illusion. The equality of opportunity, which is so prized in theory, is in practice a myth, especially for minorities and women, but also for many middle-class white workers. Now, he is absolutely right about that. It is a myth. There is no upward mobility anymore. It is very, very difficult to climb the ladder, because so many of the many people who have, many of them have decided to kick the ladder out from behind them. I mean, look, a great example is the welfare state after the New Deal. You had baby boomers who benefited greatly from these New Deal programs. They had, of course, college that was nearly free, or in some cases, absolutely free. They had all these different programs. They had pretty high wages. There was great manufacturing, a lot of jobs. They were able to own homes on one single family income. Well, what did they do? Well, they took that and they voted for Ronald Reagan that dismantled that state and gave tax cuts to a lot of people, but more so, and for the most so, for the rich. And that's one of the big problems that we have. Now, I do have to note that during those times, minorities and women are the ones who still suffered, right? So they suffered under the system no matter what. I mean, back in the 60s, when white working class men were making all that money, women were still not making money, and minorities, of course, were still being denied equal treatment and equal rights. So, and they, of course, were also suffering economically. So to be fair, it's never really been good for African Americans and women and Latinos. And so that's an unfortunate truth that a lot of people still don't like to acknowledge. But anyway, Alston, who toured the United States at the end of last year, condemned the dramatic change of direction in U.S. policies as the Trump administration pursues high tax breaks for the rich and slashes welfare benefits for the poor. So, look, this I think is an extension more of than a new change in policy. It's more of an extension of the establishment. Now, look, President Obama didn't do a whole lot of reversal of Bush policies. Yes, he pushed for a lot of climate policy that was good. And to be fair, he did get a progressive tax system put into place within the ACA. Actually, great progressive tax system in order to pay for it. It was not single payer, however, and that, of course, is very problematic because at the end of the day, it did benefit as many people as it did benefit. It also benefited corporations a lot more. So these policies, as I said, they're more of a continuation of Bush policies, but there wasn't much of a leftward reversal under President Obama, and that's what I'm trying to point out. Nonetheless, President Trump has taken right-wing policies and has basically hit the brake or hit the gas, and has gone even further to the right. Now, this, of course, is tax cuts for the rich and deregulation, as well as punishing the poor. Now, Alston had recalled what was most shocking to him during the tour of the United States. And this is the result of those policies, by the way. He said, quote, "I saw open sewage flowing into back gardens. And that is something you sort of expect in a low-income developing country, but you don't expect it in the United States." Now, this is in response actually to, or this is referring to his trip to Alabama. And there are places where it didn't even have sanitation, basic sanitation services. And again, this is America. This is the wealthiest country in the world, and yet there are places here that don't have sewer systems. I mean, that's insanity. It's absolutely wrong. Now, another thing that you don't expect, however, in a developed country is high lead levels in the water. Yet, of course, still, Flint also doesn't have drinking water. Still, years, they do not have clean water. Disaster. Now, speaking of disaster, Alston writes that I then went to Puerto Rico, which would definitely be the poorest state in the Union if it were a state. The situation was very grim, even before Hurricane Maria, but obviously exacerbated greatly after it. I'm told I'm not supposed to use the term, but certainly the conditions were very much third world. I met people who were living without any real access to the basic services that we've all come to expect. Wow. Government, he said, is just not an actor. There's no provision of social protections at all. And that, of course, is disastrous. And by the way, the death toll from Maria is anywhere from a few hundred to 10,000 within that range, according to several different studies. And that, of course, look, a lot of those deaths can be attributed to lack of medical care and lack of medical facilities, and the slow response from the Trump administration. They just do not care. Puerto Rico, to a lot of our politicians, is unfortunately an afterthought, which is really, really sad. Now, he continues, I also went to West Virginia, one of the states that did not take the Medicaid expansion, where they have relatively low rates of health insurance, and I saw the extent to which very few government services are provided for people generally, not just health, but access to the internet and so on. As was explained to me by government officials, if we propose any additional spending in the budget, it's completely out of the question. It's not going to be accepted by the legislature. And yet, we seem to have plenty of money for corporate tax cuts and incentives. That's the problem. It's the politicians. It's the politicians that are saying, no, we can't afford it. We don't want to spend money. Oh, hey, corporation, make it rain up in this bitch. Here you go. Here's all the money that you could ever need. What? We're serving the people. No, you're serving yourselves. You're serving yourselves by getting all these giant donations from these same corporations. Disgrace. And look, West Virginia also has an issue with not having clean water and clean air, thanks, of course, to the coal industry. When you have coal dust and you have coal ash being dumped into rivers. Now, of course, their legislature is strictly Republicans or purely Republicans, but hell, even the Democrats look like Republicans in West Virginia. So what you get here is a right-wing government that says, if you're poor, well, fuck you. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, what if you don't have any bootstraps? What if you don't have any fucking boots? Sad day for you, man. Now, Alston gets to the heart of what is actually going on here. He says the signature effort by the administration is to insist that people are who are receiving most of the different types of benefits are actually capable of working and should be doing so. What you've got is a pretty carefully coordinated effort coming, I understand, from the Office of Management and Budget to attach ever more demanding worker volunteer or education requirements to different benefits. That's starting to affect Medicaid, it's starting to affect government housing subsidies, and it's starting to affect food stamps. In all these cases, there are different requirements which either the federal government or state governments have been enabled to impose, which will in each case drive some millions of people off the relevant benefit rolls. The government says, but wait, there's full employment, so all these people could work if they want to. Well, already a large number of people are working, but in fact, that doesn't bring them enough income to survive. And so they still need additional food stamps, they still need access to Medicaid. Simply telling them that they have to work or volunteer for up to 30 hours a week is not going to change any of that. Well, of course, they won't, because that's not the point. See, the Republicans, they like to use welfare reform, which is what they're doing right now, as a racist dog whistle. Now, I mean, what do you think when you hear welfare, right? You don't think of the white family living in a trailer park, do you? Not often. In fact, a lot of people tend to think of the black person living in the hood. That's what they think of when it comes to welfare. Look, it's not like they hide their racism. It's fairly open. It's red meat for the base, who ironically depends on those same programs. But see, these people, they say, well, cut it from them, not from me. No, I'm a good American. I work hard. I work and I do everything that I'm supposed to do. Don't take my benefits. No, it's those lazy black people up the road. Or it's those lazy Mexicans. If they just go get a job. And by the way, Mexicans are trying to steal my job. It doesn't make any sense, but it is about racism. It is about hatred. And of course, the reason that they hate people is because some people will drive it into their heads, the people in power, that no, it's not your fault your life sucks. It's those guys' fault. It's not us. It's them. It's them. Well, look, these Republicans, these politicians, they're going to cut those benefits from you anyway. It doesn't matter if you're white or black or Latino. They're going to cut it from you. And in the case of white people, they're going to blame minorities for cutting your benefits. But the thing is there is only so long that you can keep that con running. Because look, even people who are dumb or deeply partisan will eventually wake up and think, you know what? I'm getting screwed by this system, by my own politicians. It is unsustainable. Now, there's one more thing that I want to talk about here in this report. Now, Alston goes into what the administration's policies are actually about. Tax cuts for the rich, cutting benefits for the poor, and he says this, quote, so my sense is that these are two of the major priorities of the administration. And when they're put together, it doesn't indeed seem to be a very deliberate attempt to punish the poor. I think the assumption is that poor people are, by definition, lazy and undeserving. Excuse me. I think the assumption is that poor people are, by definition, lazy and undeserving, and the appropriate response of government is to punish them and to provide as little as possible. That is what's driving most of the government policy on this issue. That is what they believe. I mean, look, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, Latino. If you're poor, they hate you. They despise you. They want to punish you. And look, one of the reasons that conservatives are so for example, they use things like the Southern strategy to go after African Americans and get the white vote, is that it works. I mean, it allows poor white people to look at other people, African Americans, and say, either it's your fault that I'm poor, or I'm better than you. I may be poor, I may be suffering, but at least I'm not like those guys. And so that is very, very beneficial for the people who are in charge, for the people who are wealthy and powerful, because instead of seeing the people who are in power, who are in charge, who are making the laws as a problem, they see their neighbors and they fight with their neighbors instead of going after the real problem. And that is the wealthy and the powerful. It's not so much race, even though race has a lot to do with it, but it is actually more of a power dynamic. It is the powerful versus the powerless. And they have used those different things to try to distract us and to make us fight each other so that we will never fight them, the real cause of our problems. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.